Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Cougar, the Bitch, and the Wardrobe. I'm Lana Mazer, also known as Curated by the Cougar. And today I want to welcome my friend, Dr. Maggie Vaughn. She is a psychotherapist, and we are going to be discussing the topic of some call it a crisis, we call it clarity. Finding your authentic self in midlife. And I want to give Maggie an opportunity to talk about yourself. I did want to say that I love the name of your website, which is everyoneneedstherapy.com. And you know what? It's true. Everyone needs therapy. I couldn't agree more. So it's very smart and to the point, and I loved it. So I just wanted to tell you that. But if you could introduce yourself to my audience and tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Of course. So, yes, I'm a psychotherapist of 20 years. I've been specializing in relationship concerns as well as all of the general stuff that comes with waking up in the morning, anxiety, depression, self-doubt, stress, life transitions. And I own a group practice that also specializes in relationships in New York City called Happy Apple. And have just come out with a parenting book. So also relationships, but pertaining in particular to parenting. It's called Beyond Perfect. And that's what I do. A little of everything. I'm also a mom of 3.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And when can we anticipate your book release?
July 14th.
Wow.
As of right now, yeah.
Okay, that's really exciting. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. The best part is I don't have to write anymore.
Yes. Yes. I had a friend on the podcast a few months ago. She also wrote a book, and she informed us of the process and how much discipline that takes and how exhausting it is because you're doing that on top of everything else that you
Other
do.
stuff.
Yes.
The other stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's incredible and can't
Thank
wait
you.
to read it.
Thank you.
So let's get into it a little bit. And we're talking about why is it that when women start asking for more in midlife, society calls it a crisis. And many women in midlife experience something powerful. And I mean, I'm talking for myself here, is that I feel like I've stopped tolerating things that once felt normal and really weren't. Or I've began questioning roles that have been a part of my life that I've played for decades and really starting to prioritize myself for the first time. And I was thinking a lot about that term midlife crisis and that it's this societal label that has existed. And I really want to stop calling it that and call it the prime era because I feel like that's a whole lot more empowering. And that's at least how it has felt for me. But I want to ask you from your psychological perspective, what is actually happening to women in this phase of life? I know that's a very broad question, but just to get into it a little
great.
bit.
There's so much there. I mean, yes, I think you use the word reclaiming. It is a period of reclaiming. I would say it is a developmental phase that occurs across cultures. It has been studied for decades. We are supposed to go through this. It is really a time of individuation in which we are asking ourselves, who am I? What are the parts of myself I have lived out up until now? What are the parts of myself I have cut off sometimes for other people's sake? Sometimes for the sake of living out these roles, as you say, for whether it's to build a marriage or to build a family or to build a career. And it's a time when the scaffolding starts to, the scaffolding that's provided by those roles starts to crumble away. And what it leaves is the individual laying bare. And there we are with ourselves, asking ourselves, okay, so now that these roles are demanding something different of us.
Yes.
Sometimes not as much of us, but usually it's just a shift. what does it mean about who I am and who I want to be in this second part of my life?
Yes.
I think there's a grieving process involved in it. I think very often women realize at this moment that what they have gone along with for decades is not serving them.
Hmm.
And they sometimes feel very angry about that, very resentful. Not that it's anyone else's fault. I mean, they've played a role in that too, but I think there's some resentment about having cut off some of the more interesting pieces of themselves along the
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
And there is that reclaiming, you know, there
Yes.
is an awakening that happens. And what is happening during this phase is a woman is questioning, what are the parts of myself that I want to live out?
Hmm.
What is the life that I want to embrace moving forward? And what does that mean in terms of what needs to get shifted in
Yes.
my relationships, in my life, circumstantially?
Yes.
So,
Yeah. No.
long answer.
No, but that's perfect because it really, I think that from the time that we are very young, and I'm pleased to see that maybe this is shifting somewhat, but I'm talking about, our generation,
Mhm.
that from the time that we were very young, we were told to get married, become moms, and not that those aren't beautiful things, but it becomes such a focus of this identity that we're trying to develop. And we're so impressionable at that stage in life because once that is being discussed, we're probably young adults moving into adulthood. And even when I think about it today, when I hear that someone's in their 20s and is getting married, I'm like, wow, they're so young,
Mhm.
but that was the case. And now there's been a shift that women have started to maybe decenter that and focus on their careers and developing that other part of themselves, which is an amazing thing. But it's very hard, I find, at any stage, because if it is children that we desire, that time in our lives has a clear end point.
Mhm.
And depending on the person, we don't know what our fertility is,
Mhm.
and we only find out once we start to try. So there's so many of these different factors that come into play. And when I think about that stage, so we're moving into that prime era, as I'm coining. So there are these identity shifts, hormonal changes that intersect very much with psychology. And I would love for you to speak on that as well, because I think that's so important. I remember during my childbearing years, and I was lucky to have not experienced any postpartum depression, but that's clearly something that is very real and is affected by a shift in hormones. So similarly, there is a shift in hormones um, as we age and approach perimenopause into menopause. So if you could talk about that a little bit, how that really is a thing and affects a woman.
Oh gosh, so much. So, yes, estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone. Estrogen activates, it plays a part. It Estrogen activates the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in decision making. It affects the part of our brain that's responsible for making memories and the emotion regulation part of our brain, the amygdala. So, as we enter middle age and estrogen fluctuates and then dips, the brain has to completely recalibrate. And essentially, what happens during that recalibration is the emotional buffer that we have been provided our entire lives that has allowed us to go along with these scripts that we were handed, that allows us to tolerate things that maybe haven't been working that well for us as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, again, we have played a role in going along with the scripts too. I'm not trying to blame anybody, but we've also had this hormonal buffer in place that starts to dissipate as we enter middle age. And so we can no longer suppress certain emotions. We can no longer accommodate to the extent that we were accommodating before.
Mm-hmm.
And we are very raw and in touch with what needs to be changed. So
Yes.
I think that has a lot to do with, what people label as a crisis. It's not so much a crisis, it is this recalibration, both of the brain and chemically, and we get there. We do recalibrate and we do reach homeostasis of some sort. But in the meantime, what this time asks of us is to really examine our lives and ourselves and how we're living and how we are accommodating other people and what we're going to put up with and what we're not. And because that tolerance level goes down, we do in fact start putting up boundaries that we weren't before. We do start, resentment rises when we start realizing, oh, I've been actually getting taken advantage of in this particular relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the types of things that happen in middle age and the hormonal explanation behind it.
And again, this can be something that arises not only in a romantic relationship, whether it's husband, wife, a girlfriend, boyfriend, but also in friendships as well, and within family relationships too. So it's not just one thing, it can be in any of these situations.
Absolutely. Well,
Yes.
we really start taking inventory of those one-sided relationships.
Yes.
I had a client last week who was talking about, this is her year of cutting out the dysfunction. And she is no longer going to work with a contractor who says he's coming tomorrow and doesn't show up for weeks on end. She is no longer dealing with the friend who conveniently drops her kids off at her house and doesn't ever offer to reciprocate. The friend who lunch after lunch after lunch allows her to pay and then somehow forgets to pay her back. Like
Yes.
these people are going. And I think the questions that we ask ourselves in regards to this are, is this a relationship in which I'm expected to connect or perform? Is this a relationship in which it's bringing me growth and replenishment, or is it just sucking me dry?
Yeah. No, that resonates with me so much because I've really thought about a lot for myself over the last few years and particularly since my divorce. And so I think that's part of it, but then I do think it's just what we're saying as we age and really reevaluating and shedding those relationships that really are like you said, one-sided, not like mutually beneficial. And also, I've talked about this in previous episodes too, is the energy that we feel from someone, the energy that we have to expend. And I have a friend who uses this saying, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna steal that.
I love it. Yeah, and it's true because we are all busy individuals, and that's really what it is coming into this prime era, is that whether we have children or not, but if you have kids, there's the kids. If you don't have children and you have family members that you're caring for, worrying about, you have a career, you have mortgage payments, you have car payments, you have to pay your taxes on time.
Right.
Everything. When you're 22 years old, that's not the case. And so we're basically maybe more able to be that, like I've said this before, like that receptacle for everyone's stuff. And I have realized very much for myself, like I am done being the emotional receptacle.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I've been there, done that, and that has to be done.
We just reach our limit. I
Yes.
think for these reasons, it's also, burnout too.
Yes.
It's something I'm hearing so much about. Burnout is through the roof in middle age. The numbers are ridiculous, especially if you look at parents.
Mm-hmm.
The number is 60% of parents are burned out. And if you are a working parent, it's
Mm-hmm.
higher than that. And so you
Yeah.
combine the hormonal, removing the hormonal buffer, the changes, the plateaus that start to take place,
Yes.
that you can imagine in family, that the possibility of your kids leaving the home, you built most of your career. So you start to reach this place where you can gain perspective on everything. You're burned out, you're completely fried.
Yes.
And there's just there are no inner resources left to just keep giving without something coming back in.
Yes. Yes. And I think also in addition to that, it's that at this stage of life too, because we've had decades behind us of experience. And so something maybe from 2 decades prior wasn't a big deal, but now it's a trigger because we've had those experiences, maybe many of them. And so something similar might occur. And at this point, we're like, we're done. Like I've been there, done that. This is triggering me. Like I have no capacity for this any longer.
You know what this makes me think of is, so you were just talking about the life scripts, which I think is such a great subject. And we get handed these life scripts from all directions right early on, and we learn you need to be nice, you need to be warm, you need to be loving, don't be too needy, don't be too fussy, you're going to be too much. And we try to be all of those things because we want to feel lovable, we want to be likable, we want to be a good girl, right?
Yes.
And by the way, when you don't go along with the scripts, you get punished for it.
Totally.
That's the reality, right?
Yes.
So you go along, you form the friendships, you do the things, and then in midlife, it's like you wake up and you realize, wait, I get a say in my script too.
Yes.
I get to, like, this isn't working for me.
Yes.
And I can deny this script, or I can start to edit this script as I would like.
Yes.
And that's what happens.
And that actually leads into my next question about things that might be like taboo or removing that taboo layer. And have you found in your practice that women will admit to you that they feel like they've been living someone else's script that might not be what they intended for themselves?
Oh, absolutely. Again, I think they learn early on what's going to get me positive reinforcement from mommy and daddy. I'm going to try to do those things. I'm going to try to do the things that please my teachers, that get me into the friend group, that keep the friends. And we learn how to accommodate. That's
yes.
It's a key life skill, and it's really, really helpful in many ways.
Yes.
The problem is that we very often can just continue to give and give and give without identifying where to draw that line. Like, where's a healthy place to draw that line?
Yes.
In a way that preserves me and allows me to live out the interesting, creative parts of myself.
Yes.
And isn't all about looking externally for the feedback that I'm enough.
Right. Yes. And so there's that element of maybe at some point feeling that we have to people please rather than living authentically. And I think this is where what we were talking about, the moment when women stopped tolerating the bullshit and they said, I've had enough. And I think that once women maybe reach that point, they're done people pleasing, they're done carrying everyone else's emotional needs, they're done shrinking themselves, and they're ready to pioneer a different type of love life maybe for themselves. So for you, what are the most common patterns you see when women hit this stage? Is there something that like that you've been maybe speaking to someone for a year, 5 years, and then there's this pattern once they get to this prime era that is now like you've seen it repeat itself in your other clients or patients?
I see it all the time. I mean, first, women come in and they just feel a little unsettled. You don't necessarily, when you enter midlife, you don't necessarily realize all of the transformations that you're entering into at one time, right? There's the hormonal piece, there's a psychological piece, there's a very existential piece. There is the, I don't know what piece, but so many pieces, right?
Yes.
And women come in and they just feel off and unsettled and generally kind of irritable, just like like something needs to change, but they don't quite know what.
Mm.
So they come in and, they process what's not working for them in their relationships. Nothing out of the ordinary. I'm not talking about women who are married to bad men at all.
Mhm.
It's just that they're annoyed in their relationship. There's something about the arrangement that's no longer serving them.
Mhm.
They're feeling generally depleted. And so after a while, we typically do this processing. And what arises very often is deep, deep resentment, deep, deep anger, and deep grief. Now, I think consciously most women aren't aware of it as grief. But, as we get deeper into the therapy process, we realize we really do have to identify what's been lost along the way. What have they not lived out? What pieces of themselves have they not lived out that they really miss, that they really like, that maybe other people told them were too much? And what do they need to cut out of their lives so that they're not feeling just constantly so drained and so accommodating? And some very painful conversations have to come with that. Now, very often we bring partners into these sessions, and sometimes these marriages, if in the case that they're married, they work out. In the case that both partners can look at what's not working and renegotiate the implicit contracts that we enter into early on in the relationships without realizing we're entering into them. If both partners are willing to renegotiate those contracts, they can make things work. But very often, what happens is one or both feel very defensive, um, very criticized, very rejected.
Mhm.
And so that renegotiation piece can fall apart.
Yes.
When both people come in and they're willing to look without personalizing the need for readjustment, change can take place and we can get back to a really happy relationship and even move on to, okay, and what does our future hold? This is exciting.
Yeah.
But when it falls apart, very often women face two options. One, they do sometimes choose to stay in a relationship they're not happy in, I will say. And it's sad to see because it tends to bring out the worst in them.
Yeah.
That's worse than being in the bad relationship itself.
Yeah.
It's what the bad relationship brings out in them. So that's a
It's like
side note.
grieving potentially like what could have been if a different decision had been made at some point in choosing a partner. And so
Right.
that a lot of resentment comes from that.
Yes, and the
Yeah.
resentment that comes toward the self
Yes.
for feeling stuck and not being able to
Feelings.
find
Yes.
an alternative, and
Mhm.
the resentment felt toward the people who a woman feels are involved in keeping her trapped.
Yeah.
Whether that's accurate or not, that's the emotion. But then there are also the women who decide to move on and to form new
Yeah.
relationships. And I always encourage women to take their time and really discover, really explore who they are, what they want, what they brought to that past relationship, good and bad, what their
Yes.
needs are in a new relationship, and, to really gain clarity, really try to make this transformation
Yes.
with the self before diving into a new relationship.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is so much of what I've been going through personally, and I've talked about it on previous episodes. And I find that and I love hearing that there is that positivity that two people that maybe have been married for 30 years that they can still find their way forward together. And I wonder though, is that rare? How often does it happen? Because one of the questions that I ask myself is, in this world that we live in and today, people hopefully live to be 90 years old. Back hundreds of years ago, people died at 30, 35.
Right.
Right. So, when you get married today, if you're 30 when you get married, you're saying to yourself, okay, like I am signing up to be with the same person for the next potentially 50 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm speaking from my personal experience. I've been married and divorced twice, and it really has made me take a deep look at what do I want moving forward? And I think in the beginning, when my ex and I split up, all I had known was being in a long-term monogamous relationship that had been most of my life. And I think in the beginning I was very eager to replace the relationship with another relationship. And now, over the last year, where I haven't really been dating at all, it's given me an opportunity to reflect on, what do I actually want? What do I envision myself as, now that I'm entering into my prime era? And whoever that I end up with, it would really have to be because they're bringing something to my life that's an enhancement.
Mhm.
And I also think that there's something powerful about that, because going back to those scripts that were set out for us, is that when I was in my 30s, and especially before I entered into my second marriage, I felt okay, like my clock is ticking. Like I was in my early 30s, which is young, but I'm like, the clock is ticking. I got to get married. I want to have kids and this and that. And so that was such a driving force to find someone.
Mhm.
And I don't know, if that weren't in my head, would I have ended up with the same
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
And again, we did an episode a week or so ago about like having regrets, and I have no regrets, which I have to say is also empowering. But now that I'm in this place in life, because I'm not going to have more children. As I like to say, I'm open for business but closed for production. um, that's empowering, because I'm not looking for a husband. I'm not looking for father for my children. They have a father. So it's like, really, what do I want? So I guess I wanted to bring that up in a sense that it can be ultimately very empowering.
It's exciting.
It's exciting. I mean, it took me, believe me, a time in therapy to get there.
Till like 5 minutes ago. Yeah.
you know, but there is something to be said, and the way that I digest certain experiences, relationships, friendships that were far different, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so I just felt like that was worth mentioning, but it's just an interesting comparison. And I guess too, like, even now with dating, I'm also so less tolerant of bullshit.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
why are you going to waste your time? I mean,
Yes.
there are two things in that. Number one, I always say to couples I work with, and individuals who are dating, that a relationship works so much better when you feel really solid as an individual and you are choosing to bring someone into
Yes.
your life, not feeling like you're coming from a place of need
Of
and
need.
um
Yes.
anyone completing you in any capacity, not just completing you but like in any way whatsoever. To know that both people are whole and have their individual lives, it's one of the healthiest things that you can bring to a relationship. It's
Yes.
great to get there, and it's hard to get there in your 20s and your 30s.
Yes.
It's hard.
Yes, and to that point, in terms of feeling complete, I also think maybe for women that are entering into this era of their lives, if perhaps there has been this loss of self where they really gave 150% of themselves to their spouse, to their children, to running the household. And now all of a sudden the children are grown, they are empty nesters. And so this buffer of the kids and the busyness of this household that needs to be taken care of is gone. And so now this person might say, well, what's left for me?
Mhm.
So, how do you work with your patients with that, or maybe to prepare for becoming an empty nester so as to avoid that from happening? 'Cause I mean, I find
Right.
that must be quite prevalent.
Yes, I first thing is get the support system in place. I mean, the absolute strongest predictor of how women fare through this period is the support system.
Mm.
So that is number one. It doesn't have to be big. It could be one or two people going through something similar.
Yes.
That is going to carry you. So that is number one. Number two, in terms of the processing that we do, is I help them to get back to themselves and really clarifying what their identity is.
Yes.
Outside of the roles, as you point out. It's who am I? What are my unique traits, talents, interests? What of those have I been living out? And what of those have I not been living out? And how might I live them out moving forward? What would that look like? And we really start to lay out a map so that they feel as though their life has the structure they need in order to feel safe.
Yes.
I think without a map, just going through a transformation is really destabilizing and scary, and you just feel like everything's off. I think you really need the map, and you need to know what it is you're moving toward.
Yes, I agree with you. I think with any stage in life, I have found that just having a close group, like you said, one or two friends that I can really count on. I have a very, very close relationship with my sister, so that has been always my greatest support. And Maggie and I also exercise and work out at the same gym. And that also has been for me one of the greatest gifts that was quite unexpected, because I started going to Rise maybe 6 months after my ex and I split up. And I was always someone who exercised, but this was different.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also really grateful for the community there.
It's huge.
Yes.
It's everything.
Yes.
A nice community, a warm community, a welcoming community.
Yes.
And on top of it, you get your endorphins boosted.
Yes. Yes.
It's all good. And you know what? Exercise too is huge. I mean, I think sleep, I'll name the obvious things. Sleep
Yes.
is number one, followed by exercise.
Yes.
And that community piece. They're all up there. And what's great about Rise is that you don't get the sleep at all, but you do get community and exercise. So that's good.
Although I am tired, so I go to bed.
Right. Well, we get the sleep after. It might help with the sleep.
We don't sleep there, but later.
We try not to, yes.
If I have not had enough coffee, sometimes I feel like I might fall asleep. But
Yes, but you'll get in trouble.
yes,
Don't do that.
Yes. Yes. No, it's so true. And I think also, I've talked about this before, is that maybe it's your career that inspires you, or maybe it's not. And if it's not, finding those things that do, what other interests or hobbies or groups or things that you can do on your own. And I feel like being able to spend time with yourself is so important, and doing the things that you love, and you can do it alone. Like, I went yesterday to see a Broadway show by myself because I love Broadway. I wanted to see Death of a Salesman. Most people were like, it's so depressing, I don't want to see it. And I'm like, it is depressing, but it's a classic, and I'm going to go see it.
Right.
But it brought me a lot of joy, just because, just the sheer fact that I was like, I want to do this. I don't have to answer to someone else. I don't have to be on someone else's schedule. I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. And that in itself is so empowering. And I really had to spend a lot of time in that, especially after my divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I had said, I felt that when that ended, that the obvious next step for me was to enter into another relationship. And I tried that, and it blew up in my face because I hadn't done the work yet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, sometimes we really have to practice enjoying the time by ourselves.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety that come up when we spend time alone, and I think it's important to build your tolerance of that.
Yes.
And then beyond that, to find things to look forward to when you're alone, because very often people focus on, I need to be okay on my own. I need to be okay. I'm just going to sit here and like bare knuckle it.
Yeah.
But it works better, I found, when you look for what's the thing I'm going to look forward to when I'm alone, as opposed to just getting to the other side of it.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to make myself a bath. I'm going to make myself some warm tea. I'm going to watch my favorite show. I'm going to get to do all of these things and eat cereal for dinner. And I'm not going to make anyone anything. And
yes,
that tends to transform the experience from being one of anxiety and apprehension to one of excitement.
Yes.
And when you do that enough times, you really do get to where you genuinely can embrace that alone time.
Yes. And I think the other thing that plays into this era too, that might be a challenge, is the negative connotation that quite often happens with divorce. That some women might feel that they were a failure as a wife and that they're going to be perceived that way. And that clearly there must be something wrong with them because the marriage didn't work out, and how are other people going to perceive them now, and if they had obviously friends that they had as a couple, and there always happens the someone chooses to be with the one and the other and whatever, and that also can be hurtful. How does someone walk through that, to get on the other side, or at least feel that this is actually, you're not the first person to go through this, and what words of wisdom can be shared with someone who's going through that?
Hmm. Well, I think sometimes going through divorce can be the strongest statement of self respect.
I
Like,
agree.
I need to take care of me, and I trust that I will take care of me.
Hmm.
I think it says a lot about um, your capacity to just step up for yourself. So
Hmm.
that's number one. Number two, you can take a look at all of the divorced people in the world, and there's some pretty great people out there who are
Yeah.
divorced.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's the majority of people who've gotten married.
Yes.
So it doesn't, and probably this doesn't need to even be said because it's so logical, but needless to say,
Yeah.
more than half of the country, more than half of the people who get married get divorced. Not all those are bad people or people who failed at their relationships.
Yes.
And by the way, if you're in a relationship that lasted for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years and then it resulted in divorce, who's to say that's a failed relationship? You
Agreed.
you
Yes.
you did it for a certain amount of time and it worked for a certain amount of
Hmm.
time. And then when it stopped working, you decided to part ways. I think there's something very respectable about that. I mean, there's a way to go about it.
Yes.
There are all sorts of ways to handle that
Yes.
situation. But without getting into that, I think, the point is it doesn't mean you're a failure. It could mean that you succeeded really, really well in that relationship and you have the confidence to move on when it stops working.
Yes. It's interesting for me also to reflect back, because I was 20 when my parents got divorced, and it took my parents 4 years to get divorced or something like that, something insane. And I remember getting to college, and my parents were going through the divorce. They moved me into my dorm, which was a nightmare. And and then I remember, like, when I was getting to know either like my roommate or other people in my dorm, and then having to tell people that my parents were going through a divorce, I felt embarrassed or ashamed that like there was something wrong with my family, even though I knew intellectually that divorce happens, and unfortunately or fortunately, whatever it is, it's common, and it's a choice that people make so that they're no longer feeling stuck in a relationship that's no longer working. And so I knew that intellectually, but emotionally it made me feel, I mean, at the time I was young, but that there was something wrong with
Mhm.
my family. And so I just, know from speaking to other women that some of those feelings, they rear their ugly head, even though intellectually they know it's common. I'm not the first person to get divorced, but it's still hard.
Completely. I think it often takes time for what we know intellectually to connect with what we experience emotionally and in our bodies.
Yes.
And so, what I would say for people who are early in that process or new to being divorced is to allow it some time, give it some time, give your body and your emotions sometime to catch up to what you know to be your truth. You wouldn't
Yes.
have done it if it weren't right for you.
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes people go through divorce and they don't want a divorce. So, maybe they feel it's not right for them. But if anyone wanted a divorce, it's right for both people involved.
Yeah.
So I would just say give yourself some time for the emotional part of yourself to catch up
To
to what
catch
you
up. Yeah.
intellectually know to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think of course, again, depending on what stage of life when that's happening, also, if the kids are young or older and things like that, that obviously comes into play. But it is especially now coming into this prime era. I feel that a lot of marriages face this pressure during this stage, and talking about growth, and hopefully as we age, we evolve as human beings. Like, I'm not the same person I was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. There's still certain parts of my core personality that are there, but people change. What happens in those situations, and maybe we kind of touched on this a little bit, where one person, and again, I hate to say it's more women versus men, but I think more women in general are maybe more in touch with their emotions. They also are more, they're the ones to seek therapy over men. So, what happens in those situations where one really has evolved and the other one really hasn't? Can the other person
Yes, yes,
catch
yes,
up?
yes. Um, well, what happens is everything is seen through that gap. So when one person is growing and the other is not, the person who is growing interprets everything as proof they're just so different. Like, this person's never going to change. There's a level of frustration and
Yes.
intolerance. Um, and the person who has not grown feels abandoned. They're like, this is not what we agreed to. This is not the relationship we got into. They feel
Yeah.
abandoned, they feel criticized, they feel rejected and confused. So again, it's about, can these partners come together
Mm,
and renegotiate and make room for the two of them to grow together, or make room for them, the one to grow in some way and the other to grow in another way, or one's going to grow, one's not going to grow. But they have to look at that and decide what they're going to do with it. And very often they don't, because this person who's growing starts to just, you know, honestly lose respect is often what it comes down to. This is, I'm using the words of my clients.
yes.
They tend to lose respect for the partner that they view as not having evolved.
Yeah, this is very familiar.
Yeah.
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 Yes.
The respect thing is huge.
Yes.
And the other problem is that when you lose respect, you lose chemistry, you lose attraction. So, like, I mean, the relationship just starts to fall apart in so many ways.
Yes. So, talking about intimacy, is there a way to bring that back, to get it back?
Mm-hmm.
How can two people find one another again in that way?
Well, there are so many reasons that the excitement of intimacy and the early chemistry
Mm-hmm.
dissipates over time. I mean, one can be hormonal changes. So
Yes.
certainly, if there's a possibility that there's a chemical thing going on, I think it's worth seeing a endocrinologist,
Yes.
or a gynecologist who is very informed about exactly how to optimize hormones. That would be number one.
Yes.
The real question is why. It is the
Mm-hmm.
why.
The why.
So I think very often couples need to go to therapy to get to that, and
Mm-hmm.
then to determine whether or not that is something they can work through, or is not. It's hard when years and years have gone on and one or both partners is no longer interested in the sex. It's very hard to bring it back.
To bring it
I
back,
am not
yeah.
going to lie. There are sex therapists who will tell you it is possible. I have very rarely see it come back.
Yes.
When it's dwindled away.
Yeah. And I think so much of it, I mean, especially for us as women, there's that emotional mental component. So if that's been eroded away, that's really hard. And then again, as you mentioned, which I think is so important, we've spent some time talking about this at a previous event, but that entering into this phase of life and being aware of how your body is changing. So if and when you feel these hormonal shifts,
Mhm.
that you don't need to feel ashamed or ignore them, because there are things that can can be done so that you feel back to yourself in that capacity.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And sometimes there's discomfort that can certainly be addressed. This
absolutely.
stuff is all totally
Yes.
normal and does get fixed. So that's what I would say. Those are the easy fixes. When there is something that you can very obviously point to,
Yes.
it can almost certainly be addressed and fixed. And by the way, there are lots of things you can do sexually to enjoy your sex life without actually having sex.
Yes.
So there's that as
Yes.
well. But I think it really comes down to the why.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, what Maggie just said, we did a conversation, a panel discussion at Soho House back in the beginning of February, and I moderated a conversation between someone who is a pelvic floor and sex therapist, and then another woman who has the oldest sex toy shop in New York. And she was very well educated and informed on all the toys. And so, if anyone is interested, that episode is also available on Spotify and Apple Music, and it is called The Empowered Pussy.
Amazing. I think that's appropriately named.
Yes. And it was so funny because we had to post it
Yeah.
like on social media. So we had to make the S's dollar signs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then I was like, is someone gonna think that like I'm trying to like selves?
Well, they have to click to find out.
You have to click to find out, but that's not what it was. But yes, but it was funny. But again, it was like, to your point, it was really interesting to hear both women speak, and that like there are ways to work through it if you want to work through it
Right.
with someone.
Right.
That there are options out there
Yes,
for
yes.
you. Yes.
You know, it's interesting. You were alluding to this a minute ago. So oftentimes there's the desire discrepancy because, like you were saying, women so often want to have sex when they want to connect more deeply. If when the relationship and that sense of emotional connection feels like it's there for them.
Yes.
And this is confusing to men who are basically like, I'm here.
Yeah.
So I think, men feel like they have to jump through hoops to get a woman to that place where they feel emotionally, and then they don't do it and they feel like failures. And
Yeah.
so getting into that dynamic in couples therapy can be very helpful, like figuring out what makes a person feel emotionally connected.
Yes.
And what makes the other partner, who most often in my experience is the husband, feel competent and capable of providing that. Because there are very often the cases where women say, you got to do this, you're not doing that, and they do that, and then that doesn't work. There's still no emotional connection.
Yeah.
So it's oftentimes about how do you get out of that.
Yeah, and I think such a good point, because we also cannot expect our partners to just know if we've never expressed that. So being able to have that conversation and communicate that is so important and powerful, because maybe that just alone is enough to get beyond that sticky point. So
Exactly.
yes. So now bringing it all back together, what does healthy reinvention look like psychologically?
I would say it is about identifying where you would like to go from here, identifying your goals, and trying to come up with a map for reaching that, as opposed to behaving hastily and trying to run from what's not working, which is when this backfires, when the transformation is not actually a transformation, but a reaction. We don't
Yes.
want to be just reactive.
Mm-hmm.
It's understandable because women are very often fed up, they're sick of it, they reach this point where they realize I can no longer do this. And once you have that realization, it becomes harder and harder to tolerate those things that are not working.
Yes.
So there is a tendency to react, but being reactive is often destructive. And so I think that's what we want to be careful not to do.
Mm-hmm.
But instead to focus on what we're building. Where are we going from here? Are we being thoughtful? Are we being deliberate? Are we taking our time? And are we willing to adjust the plan as we move forward and
Yes.
as needed? Whereas I think when you're being reactive or more impulsive, the change doesn't last. You will get a change in a moment,
Yes.
but it's kind of like, oh, I'm so pissed my boyfriend broke up with me. I'm gonna go out and get wasted tonight. Well,
Yeah.
that doesn't really work. I mean, you can do it, but it doesn't really like make things better, right?
Yes.
That's the difference between a reaction and doing something more deliberate, which is like, you know what, I'm going to focus on my career at this point in time because that's going to give me a sense of control over my life and self-worth.
So it's the impulsive decisions versus the authentic change.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Like authentic and lasting and deliberate and thoughtful.
So what helps women navigate this stage in a healthy way? Therapy, support from friends, anything else that we might have missed that they should do?
Those are really important. As I said, I think the research shows that community is the most important thing during this phase. Therapy with someone who's informed about midlife changes.
Yes.
So you want to really ask your prospective therapist, like, have you worked with many people my age and people going through these types of things? You might need couples therapy if you're considering, if you're in a partnership and you're thinking about renegotiating those implicit contracts that you entered into without realizing it that are they're outdated now.
Yes.
I think working with a menopause informed gynecologist is very helpful. Getting ahead of that, even if you don't have any obvious symptoms.
Yes.
Just minor sleep disruptions can make a big difference in our moods and how well we tolerate things and how well we problem solve.
Yes.
So I think having that in place, you said the community, I think finding the language, to use around this, recognizing this is not a crisis. This is a stage of development.
I love that. Yes, because you basically answered my next question.
Okay.
Because I was going to say that if a woman who's listening to this episode and she feels like her life is shifting and she's questioning everything, how does she know that how does she feel confident in herself, knowing herself that she's not having a crisis, but actually stepping into clarity?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it does feel internally like a crisis, right?
Yes.
Because there's this internal tension. Again, you've lost that hormonal buffer that helps you to tolerate things that aren't working very well for you. So it feels very, very destabilizing, understandably. So it feels similar to a crisis, but it is normal and it is to be expected. What I would say is just take your time and don't make any instant decisions.
Yes. No rash decisions.
Run them by a friend who you can trust, or a therapist, or whatever, a close family member who's not going to judge.
And not let our emotions influence our actions.
Right.
Yes.
And not try to impose some immediate change just in order to feel better in this moment.
Right.
So really asking yourself, if I do this thing that I have the urge to do,
yes,
what will the repercussions be tomorrow and next week?
Yes.
And who will be affected by them?
Yes.
And do I still want to make that decision?
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. Before we close out, is there anything else that we might have left out that you wanted to address today?
No, this is great.
Thank you so much. Fun. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And it really is so meaningful to me to have you here as a professional, to speak from this place and address my female audience. It's really so helpful. And I want to encourage my listeners today that if someone you know might benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them, because you're spreading the word, you're helping a friend, a family member, a coworker, and that's a wonderful thing. And also it means so much to me. You, by doing that, helps the podcast continue to grow. And I also want to say that midlife isn't the unraveling of a woman's life. For me, I have felt, and for many women, it's the moment that we can finally start living our lives on our own terms. Until next time.